Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 4 of Tour of Romandie. Today's race is going to be an exciting race, but we're not going to get to see any of it unless you go back and watch the replays, if you're living in the US, that is, because the cameras come on with about 14 kilometers to go. You absolutely want to watch the 14 kilometers this morning if you had time, but now with the replay, they finally put up more of the stage, so they're showing you 65, 75 kilometers of the stage later. But to begin with, FlowBike really messed up, and they only showed us the last 14 kilometers of the race here in North America, or at least in Bend, Oregon anyways, where I'm watching it from. 14 kilometers is what we got. I'll go back and describe some of the stage earlier because I got to view it quickly before I shot the video here after I realized they were reposting it and showing most of the stage. So I'll give you a post later, but I'll give you my experience of watching it with 14 kilometers to go. Because when the cameras come on, we see Clement Berth. He's solo with about a minute gap. He rides for AGR Decathlon. He's up the front solo. When we look at the peloton, it's Ineos on the front with 5 riders. We got up front there, Castroviejo is sitting second wheel, and in front of him, it's their sprinter, Ethan Hayter. I'm sitting on the Chesterfield, I'm like, Ethan Hayter, you're not riding at the back, man, you're on the front. You're delivering the goods right now for Ineos, because Carlos Rodriguez is 4th on the general classification, only 11 seconds down on Ayuso, and so he's got a shot at winning today's race, but he needs to get a gap on Ayuso. He needs to be able to get time bonuses or a gap on Ian Van Wilder, who's sitting second at 7 seconds, and he needs a gap, of course, on Vlasov Bora-Hansgrohe, who's at 10 seconds. So Ineos riding the front right now makes total sense to me. They're going full gas. How Ethan Hayter's on the front is what I'm surprised about, but they're going full gas. Now let me back the film up to this morning when we see Plapp giving an interview. In Plapp's interview, he says, well, guys, let me remind you, more or less is what he's telling us viewers, is that Juan Ayuso won the individual time trial last year at Romandie, and then he lost it on the mountain stage the next day. Of course, Adam Yates did take the overall general classification in that stage, so they kept it in the family. But Plapp's just reminding everybody right now that Adam Yates isn't very high on the general classification because he's a minute plus back on everybody. And Ayuso, well, he failed last year after the individual time trial where he was spectacular too and good through Tour of Romandie up until then, but then failed on the mountain stage. But then we're going to look at the interview before today's stage 4 too of Juan Ayuso, and he explains what happened last year. Last year, he came into this race with a knee problem, and so he didn't have the right training, he didn't have the right intensity, he didn't have the right amount of races. This year, he won the Basque Country is what he reminds us while he's speaking Spanish. I had to have my boy translate everything for me because you know my Spanish isn't very good, you know my French isn't very good, and you know my English isn't very good, so how am I going to know what he said? So I have Garrett translate for me, and basically the gist of it is Juan Ayuso's got confidence. The circumstances are different this year because he hasn't had any problems and he's already been winning races like the Basque Country. So today he says, of course, it's complicated with everyone so close on the general classification, but he says he needs to keep an eye on Carlos Rodriguez. I said yesterday after stage 2 on the Butterfly Effect that I would race 100% for Juan Ayuso here on stage 4, but I want to keep it together. I want to have it going as slow as it possibly can all the way up to the summit of today's stage with 150 kilometers of race and 5 categorized climbs. And most of these climbs are 8, 9, and 10% sections throughout all the climbs. And the final climb is vicious as it's going to have switchbacks all the way up. So like I said yesterday, I want to race for Ayuso, but I want to keep it together. I want to have Adam Yates take him all the way in the 200 meters to go and just win in a field sprint. My words exactly, basically from yesterday, was a field sprint at 200 meters to go on a summit finish. If you can make it happen, make it happen. That means ride as slow and easy as you possibly can, but bring the brakes back if they're dangerous when you're going halfway up the climb. Or of course, if they're not dangerous, you can let the brake go and take the time bonuses, and then you have to literally get dropped. Juan Ayuso would have to get dropped on today's stage if you can give the time bonifications away to the break rider up front, Clement Berth. Well, as we're going up the climb, Ethan Hayter's doing a great job, and Castroviejo's on the front too, riding with him. And we're going to start seeing Brandon McNulty along with his teammate Jan Christian, who went out first at about 10 kilometers to go. Brandon McNulty goes out a kilometer later at 9. Then at 8 kilometers to go, we see Jonathan Castroviejo come out the back, and it's their sprinter Ethan Hayter that's still on the front. Guys, he's drilling it on the front. He's going to go all the way into 7 kilometers to go up this last and final mountain stage here of Tour of Romandie. Once he comes off at 7, it's time for our Ensman to get on the front. Our Ensman's got the peloton now strung out. Everybody's hurting. It started with about 40 riders. Now we're getting down to about 30 riders up here with our Insman going full gas. We come into the left turn here with about 5.8 kilometers to go. As they go into the left, we see Clement Berth. He's up there solo still, but he's about to get caught because our Insman's drilling it on the front. And we're going to see Jai Hindley come out the back of the peloton. He wasn't a big-time GC threat, but he did win the Giro before, so he's a Grand Tour winner. Now he's getting dropped, so you know the pace at the front's going fast. And we see our Insman wrap up the solo breakaway rider Clement Berth. As Clement Berth's wrapped up, it's time for Egan Bernal to go to work. The Colombian's throwing in attack with about 5.3 kilometers to go. As the Colombian's going up the road, oh man, there's some trouble in the back. He's got a gap back there. Sivakov's on the front. And we're going to see that Juan Ayuso has to get on the radio. He's getting on the radio right now, and he's telling his boy, slow down. Sivakov knows he's got to back off. But once Sivakov backs off, Carlos Rodriguez closes the gap up to his teammate Egan Bernal. This was the plan, send Egan up the road, see if there's any damage from the race leader's yellow jersey there, and then bridge the gap. He bridges the gap. We'll see that Carapaz is going with him. And then Lipowitz from Bora Hansgrohe is going to jump across. This kid Florian, he's got some form right now as he's dropping the race leader's yellow jersey. We got 4 guys in the front. Now we got Sivakov setting the pace right there. He finally smoothed out his pace a little bit so that Juan Ayuso could recover a little bit and start doing some tempo. There's 4 riders chasing 4 with Sivakov on the front. He's got his teammate Yellow, like I said. We see Vlasov is there, and we see Enric Mas from Movistar's there. 4 chasing 4. Everybody else is coming out the back, but they're still struggling. Adam Yates is still in and around. Sivakov is still there on the front, trying to close the gap up to the 4 leaders. As they claw it back, we got 8 riders at the front of the group, but we got a couple other stragglers. Ian Van Wilder, the Soudal Quick-Step riders, finding his way back up to the group to put 9 up there. Then we'll see Adam Yates come back on with Christian Rodriguez from Arkea Samsic. Now we got 11 riders in the front group. Egan Bernal still on the front. He's driving the pace. They know right now because they saw blood in the water once they saw Ayuso get on the radio and tell Sivakov had to slow up. So Egan Bernal still going full gas. Carlos Rodriguez is sitting there trying to win today's stage 4 and take the general classification. Now we're going to see as the pace up front starts getting a little bit faster, they're starting to list all the riders in the front group. Only problem is when you're looking at this list right here on the side, it's got 3 UAE team member riders listed, but we're seeing Adam Yates and Sivakov get dropped out the back at this same point in time. So the list is coming up a little bit too late. Egan Bernal still driving it on the front. Then we're going to get into about 3.2 kilometers to go, and Florian Lipowitz, he throws in attack for Bora Hansgrohe. Man, what are you doing? This is not what I'd want to do. He's 32 seconds down in the general classification, but Vlasov was in the group, and he's dangling off the back with an attack there from Lipowitz. He's throwing in a gap, and he's got Carapaz coming along with him. Then we'll see behind, it's Carlos Rodriguez. He's closing the gap, but look at the head drop on the race leader's yellow jersey. Looks almost identical to last year when he was getting dropped on the climb too. His head's all the way between his shoulder blades there as Juan Ayuso's opening up the gap to Carlos Rodriguez. Rodriguez is going to close the gap up to the 2 riders in front to put 3 riders up there, and then Carlos Rodriguez goes right to the front setting some tempo because he's got a shot at winning the general classification here at Tour of Romandie. But he still has to keep Florian Lipowitz under control from Bora Hansgrohe because they only have a 21-second gap between those 2 on general classification. So he can't get too dicey right now and ride the front and then get dropped from the Bora Hansgrohe ride. When we look back, we see Ayuso, he's still hurting, but he's got Vlasov on his wheel and Enric Mas there. Then Vlasov and Enric Mas attack Juan Ayuso as the UAE Team Emirates riders going out the back. All of a sudden, he's losing time big time. We see Ian Van Wilder was back there too, but when we go back up front, Lipowitz is on the front. Guys, what's he doing? Bora Hansgrohe riders on the front, pulling Carapaz and pulling the virtual race leader here on stage 4, Carlos Rodriguez. As he's pulling on the front, he's going to be up there for about 100, 150 meters. Then Carapaz, EF Education, is going to throw in his attack. Once he throws in his attack, he gets a gap immediately. Carlos Rodriguez comes back up to the front, and now he's pulling Lipowitz, who set up the attack there from EF Education, Carapaz. Now Carapaz is sprinting. Every time he looks back, he sits down, then he gets back up out of the saddle. He's sprinting like crazy. He's got the gap going up to about 50 15 seconds to the two chasers behind, with Carlos Rodriguez struggling to hold Richard Carapaz there at front. But he doesn't have to bring him back, but he does have to go 100% because, like I said, Vlasov's back there with Enric Mas chasing in the third group, and they're only at about 15 seconds too. Now we're coming into 1.2 kilometers to go. It's the KOM finish here, as we see that Carapaz is coming through first, but still his gap is not very big, and the climb's still going. This was a cruel thing here from the organizers to put in the KOM at 1 kilometer, 1.2 kilometers from the finish of today's stage when it's still climbing all the way up. We go under 1K. Richard Carapaz again still in the saddle, out of the saddle, in the saddle, out of the saddle. He's stretching every bit of energy out of his legs. As we look back, it's still Carlos Rodriguez on the front trying to win the general classification. Now we get under about 500 meters to go. The road is still going up. You see Carapaz up there again struggling to find some more energy because the gap is still only at about 10 seconds. We look further back at 500 meters as the two chasers. Lipowitz is going to get on the race radio. He's going to get the A-OK. Now the jump, Carlos Rodriguez here, and at 350 meters to go, Lipowitz throws in a huge attack. Now with this attack, he's bridging up to Carapaz as Carapaz is looking back over his shoulder. He sees the Bora Hansgrohe rider coming. 75 meters to go, he looks back over, and Lipowitz is right coming up on the back wheel there. Carapaz throws in one more acceleration, sits up just before the line as Lipowitz is catching his back wheel, but just his back wheel, because Carapaz is going to win today's stage 4 for EF Education. Lipowitz is going to come across the stage for second, but third, Carlos Rodriguez held on to maybe about a 10-second gap back there for third to round out the podium, but to take the race leader's yellow jersey as he crosses the line, the Ineos rider knows he's going to be in yellow after stage because the gap back there to Vlasov was just a little bit too big. Vlasov ended up crossing the line just behind the rider of Enric Mas from Movistar, who got fourth, and Vlasov fifth on the stage. Sixth, Egan Bernal. Egan Bernal ended up dropping Juan Ayuso back there and solos across for sixth. And Ayuso comes through for 11th on the stage, about 45 seconds down on today's stage winner from EF Education, Carapaz, and about 30-35 seconds back from the new race leader's yellow jersey of Carlos Rodriguez. Now, after the stage, when it was all said and done, guys, this was an exciting last 15 kilometers if you watched only 15 like I did. But then later when I go back and look at the stage, we see there was a breakaway of about 7-8 riders going up the road, and Clement Berth was the general classification threat in there at just under 1 minute and 30 on the general classification. But when I watched it, I saw UAE Team Emirates, and it looked like they were going full gas because the peloton was split down to about 40 riders at that point in time, and they looked like they were just going too hard and riding the front when they didn't need to ride the front or make it any harder when it's only Clement Berth. You want Clement Berth and that break to go the whole distance. They should have been giving them like a 2 minute and 2.5 minute gap, as I've been more comfortable on. Plus, if you can get another team to chase, would have been Ineos. We know that already after the fact because they end up getting on the front and chasing with about 56 kilometers to go is where I saw the pictures start happening. So if they would have been on the front for another 10K earlier, maybe Ethan Hayter's not as good. Maybe we see that Jonathan Castroviejo's not as good. They can't pull as long going up the final climb. So then our Insman is on the front much sooner. Now his acceleration's not as impressive. Then that sets up that Egan Bernal has to go maybe a little bit earlier, or the pace is just slower until Egan Bernal goes. Juan Ayuso's in better shape because they saved a little bit energy on the earlier parts of the stage. Now, like I said, I didn't get to watch the whole stage, but it looked like to me that UAE Team Emirates pushed the pace too much for too long when they should have let other teams do it because Clement Berth wasn't a threat. If you gave him 2.5 minutes, you could have gave that break 3 minutes gap and then just set a steady pace up the last and final climb. Bring back 1.5 minutes, minute and 20 would have been better, 1 minute and 2 minutes back on the last climb. So he's not a threat, but he's taken all the time bonifications away, and then maybe the other guys in the break even take second and third bonifications away from the race leaders' rivals back there from Ineos, Bora Hansgrohe, and Ian van Wilder, so they're not a threat. That would have kept everything smoother. Now the next mistake UAE Team Emirates did that I noticed for sure was Sivakov when Egan Bernal threw in his attack just over 5 kilometers to go. Sivakov panicked. He went straight to the front. Again, if you go back to the butterfly effect, what I explained to you guys, you just want a field sprint. And Egan Bernal's not a threat on GC, so Sivakov really panicked. He went hard on the pedals there and into the red instead of thinking, I have to go all the way up to 200 meters to go right here because Adam Yates is already having problems. So I need to stay with my race leader's yellow jersey to 200 meters to go, keep the pace as steady as I can. If Ayuso says, hey, I'm fantastic, bring Egan Bernal back, you bring it back. But he didn't say that, and clearly Ayuso was suffering from the pace that Sivakov made. Now, that was the second problem. The third problem is you see that second problem caused Ayuso to get on the race radio. If you're back there and you're Carlos Rodriguez from Ineos, once you see Ayuso get on the race radio and tell his teammate Sivakov, hey, you got to slow down. I'm above the red right now. I'm going to get dropped. You have to slow down, which Sivakov did. But it showed the signs. It's just like sending a fax out, a newsletter, an email over there to Carlos Rodriguez that, hey, my name is Juan Ayuso. I'm suffering here. I'm at the limit. Juan Ayuso sees that, boom, jumps across the gap to Egan Bernal, and now Sivakov stuck back right in the front, and his legs are already blowing up, and Juan Ayuso was already blowing up from the pace of Sivakov, the first acceleration when Egan Bernal went. That was a big-time mistake. After that, the next knucklehead, Lipowitz. I know this is a difficult situation, but when you're looking at the riders with Egan Bernal in the front and Lipowitz throws in attack with 3.2, at that moment, you've already seen that Ayuso's hurting, so Lipowitz has to wait for Ineos Carlos Rodriguez to throw in the attack. Once he throws in the attack, then you go with it, you sit on the wheel, and you attack him later if Vlasov can't follow that attack right away, which we see that Vlasov was on the back of that group 8-9 riders when Lipowitz threw in the attack, so he's already struggling back there. And he was a GC threat where even with the time bonifications, he could win the overall general classification, or at least take the lead here after stage 4, because there's still tomorrow stage 5 field sprint that's left here at Tour of Romandie. But Lipowitz was basically a knucklehead for doing that attack when you know Carlos Rodriguez was in the position where he had to attack and make the selection. Lipowitz could have just followed it. Later, the second knucklehead move from Lipowitz, for sure, pulling on the front. Why were you pulling Richard Carapaz and the virtual race leader Rodriguez up there when you didn't have to, Lipowitz, and your teammate back there is chasing with Enric Mas? There is no reason for you to be on the front. Then Carapaz lit you up at the finish and, of course, won today's stage. So, Bora Hansgrohe, Lipowitz, knucklehead, at least 2 times on today's stage. I know it's a little bit close because he's 32 seconds down on the general classification, but you don't have to be the first rider attacking. You certainly don't have to be pulling, so you're knucklehead. And UAE Team Emirates, Sivakov too hard. The whole team rode too hard early. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. This was a brilliant stage to watch. The 14 kilometers that I got to watch anyways. I'll go back and watch the earlier stuff later tonight. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.